Welcome to the Surrogacy Warrior podcast with your host, Kimberly Surratt. Join us as we dive deep into the heart of surrogacy, offering insights, sharing stories, and providing advice. Our mission is to illuminate every corner of surrogacy, from the emotional roller coasters and legal battles to the triumphant moments of birth and beyond. Surrogacy Warrior is more than just a podcast. It's a community for anyone touched by or interested in the transformative power of surrogacy. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, lawyersforfamilies.com. Now here's the host of Surrogacy Warrior, Kimberly Surratt.
Welcome to Surrogacy Warrior, everyone. This is the podcast where we're going to navigate and look through surrogacy and assisted reproduction and all of the family elements that come with that. I'm Kim Surratt, your host. I'm your passionate advocate for creating families through these remarkable paths. Today, we've got a good friend of mine who I just adore, but this is Sarah Paige. She is with Art Risk Financial and Insurance Solutions. And Sarah, do you want to give a little intro about yourself and your history, your background?
Sure, I would love to. I just want to first start saying that I adore Kim as well. I adore you as well. So I have been in the assisted reproductive technology community, the art community, since 2010. So 14 years at this point. I am an insurance agent and specialize in surrogacy insurance, donors, intended parents, newborn. I have been a strong advocate for making sure that insurance companies do what they say they're supposed to do. And if not in a fair and just way, then trying to work to better that entire community. But yeah, I really love working with everyone and very happy to be here.
All right, my friend. Well, speaking of that fair and just way that we want insurance companies to behave, if only we could just have a magic wand and force them to behave. But I think in general, especially in the United States with U.S. citizens, we generally understand that insurance can't always be trusted. They're not always our best friends, but they're a necessary evil. And I don't think in this industry, we work a lot with international clients and they don't always understand that. But all right, my friend. So, the reason we wanted to do this show today is to really explain and go through for the public some of where are the obstacles, where are the problems that we're having with insurance when it comes to surrogacy, when it comes to assisted reproduction in general with third parties. So, what are the big highlights, do you think? What are the big three categories or so that we could put those problems into, and we'll go through them?
Yeah, I think the first one, to be frank, is the Affordable Care Act timeframe. I think that is a big hurdle and obstacle when you have an open enrollment period. The second is going to be the types of policies that are available when you're outside of that time frame and the cost prohibitiveness of it. And I would say the third is going to be actually their ACA policies, but liens and exclusions that we find within the policies that can, again, kind of change the access that somebody may have or the dollar amount that somebody may be spending on insurance.
All right, so let's tackle the first one, which is open enrollment time frame, when you can receive certain policies. It is a very common statement amongst my clients to say, I just can't get an insurance policy any time of year. So let's go through that and kind of help everybody understand what we're dealing with that.
Yeah, so ACA has done wonderful things. I always like to start with that. There's been a lot of positives with it. One of the negatives, the downfalls, is that there's an open enrollment period, which means that there's only a very specific time frame that anyone can actually purchase insurance during the year. And that starts in November with an effective date not until January. And most states run through about January 15th with another effective date of February 1st. So essentially, you have between November and January 15th to get insurance for either a January 1st or a February 1st effective date. And that's it. That's pretty much what you have. Now, different states can have different rules, but the majority of the states are on that timeline, which then if we are not getting insurance in that period, then you're looking at alternatives. But what else it does is that if someone decides to start a journey or gets the news that, hey, we've reached the end of the ropes and we're going to be looking at surrogacy now, right? We've gone through the infertility process, but we're here. It halts their journey. It pauses their journey until ACA can come back around. So what it does is it limits people from pursuing that dream of family for several months. And depending on when they do it, if they miss a window, it could actually do it for an entire year. Which at that point in time is heartbreaking when you've waited so long to get to have a baby and you're told surrogacy is the next route and you go for it and you're told, sorry, we can't do anything just yet because we have to wait another 6 months or another 9 months or another year to get better insurance for you. That's hard. That's hard to talk to intended parents about. That's hard for another intended parent to have to wait that long, and especially given some of the alternatives, which I know we'll jump into, become cost prohibitive for families trying to afford this journey.
So from an advocacy perspective, because of course that is part of the goal of this podcast, is to really push for advocacy, what states can do, what can people do, what can they ask for to fix that specific problem?
So the best thing that people can ask for is pregnancy as a qualifying life event. That's a wonderful thing to ask for. There are 8 states currently that offer pregnancy as a qualifying life event. I know more get added, but it's like one a year. It's very slow in adding. And really, I think that's the biggest thing, is asking for that. And then the other thing to ask for as well is, I understand why they have it, but to see if there's some states have pushed open enrollments out, depending on certain things that are going on within the state. California has pushed out, New York has pushed out, and allowing for more time. So that's something you could advocate for as well, is maybe, not having just until the 15th of January, but pushing and seeing, is there any way that the state is willing to actually push further out and maybe till the 15th to allow 15th of February to allow another effective date. New York has done that. Washington, D.C. has done that. California's has pushed to the 31st to help. So I think the best one definitely is pregnancy as a qualifying life event. If you can have that, that is wonderful. And I love the way that New York and Vermont have it, which is that essentially if you become pregnant at any point in time during the year, they'll allow it. And you could actually be 3 and 4 months pregnant and they would still allow you to have as a qualifying life event. Connecticut is the most restrictive, which I don't like. I don't like restrictions. I'd like it to be more open. But Connecticut it's only 30 days from commencement of pregnancy, and they consider commencement the transfer date. So you're barely out of knowing if the transfer was viable or not before you have to procure the insurance. The other ones allow you to know that there's a heartbeat and that this is going to be something that is really good to move forward. So that I would say that was the biggest thing, is to advocate for that pregnancy as a qualifying life event.
Well, and that's advocacy beyond surrogacy. That's advocacy for women and their health and taking care of them. They accidentally got pregnant. We have states right now that don't want them to have abortions.
Right.
But also don't want to have insurance, right? Because they didn't qualify.
And
Yeah.
what's wild is that it's accepted by Medicaid. Medicaid absolutely considers a change in family status of being pregnant, but the Affordable Care Act does not. So it's interesting that when the Affordable Care Act is run by the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, that they're not following the same guidelines that they actually have for the federal Medicaid.
Right.
So I think these are things that can be pushed, and given that you already have a set of standards that are there, sometimes it's not the hardest thing. I'm not saying it's not hard, but but in terms of going against something and saying, hey, we're not asking for anything new necessarily, we're actually just asking for an addition to this, not only on the Medicaid, now we're asking for individuals. Group insurance, sometimes we'll have that as well, depending on that. If there's a change in family size, pregnancy included, you can get on group insurance. So it really is the individual market that tends to not be as friendly towards those that are getting pregnant, which is interesting.
Those that are listening, if you're involved in legislatures, if you are a lobbyist or you are a representative, it's a simple fix. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, like Sarah said, nothing is simple when it comes to the
Right.
legislature. We understand that. But it's not a foreign concept to the insurance industry.
Right.
It's not a foreign concept because it's within the Medicaid system, like you were
Right.
saying. So the language is there. We know what it is. We know how to get there, and it protects women. One of the scariest, most dangerous things for a woman is being pregnant. I mean, it is not exactly easy on our bodies. There are a lot of things that can go wrong. And not having insurance is nearly a death sentence in the US, right? When you have a medical condition and something goes wrong.
Right.
All right, so that was issue number one. So the second thing that we see that you mentioned, you're talking about just policies and what they do or don't cover, what's within them, and any discrimination within those policies. I don't think you used the word discrimination, but I just did.
I did it.
What is that about?
I mean, look, here's the thing. I wholeheartedly feel that it is discrimination. What I find interesting is when sometimes we have pushed that term up to the Department of Insurances, we have been very clearly told that it's not, because it doesn't discriminate against a specific class of people. It's a subclass of people, which apparently is okay to discriminate against. I'm not saying that it's okay, but there's no laws that protect it, essentially. So that has been hard. But what we're talking about in terms of the discrimination factor, which let's use the term because that's what it is that it's where insurance will cover a pregnancy. Let's say that I just became pregnant from X, and my pregnancy would be covered, and it wouldn't be questioned as to how I got pregnant or why I got pregnant or anything of that nature. I would just be pregnant because I was able to, quote unquote, naturally conceive. When it starts to work into surrogacy, what we find is that what we call splitting hairs. They start to split the hairs and ask, well, how did you become pregnant and why are you pregnant? And we have a lot of issues with that because first of all, it doesn't ask you, nor should it matter why you're getting insurance. They took away any questions about your health history on any insurance application. And so if pregnancy is covered, then pregnancy in general should be covered. It shouldn't be that because I am a surrogate, I'm a gestational carrier, that I don't have coverage anymore because I am choosing to be pregnant for someone else. The reality is that I always look at it, and it's not necessarily the right way to look at it, but it's the best thing that I can correlate it to with insurance companies is actually adoption. And I do not in any way believe that surrogacy is adoption. It's the best thing I can correlate it to when I am arguing and trying to advocate for clients and having coverage is you don't ever ask a woman who is pregnant, who is choosing to give up their child for adoption, You don't ask them why, and you don't ask them who they're going to, and you don't discriminate against that coverage of them allowing that child to be born and have care around and surrounding that pregnancy and that child. And so why are we asking somebody else? Why are we invading that person's privacy and that right to privacy, and then choosing not to cover because they've made a decision to help another family become, a family, I guess, a family in general. And so they have very clear-cut exclusions. One of our insurance carriers has the exclusion written in multiple ways, but surrogacy and surrogate are discussed 34 times in their policy booklet, which is wild to me. It's one of the highest numbers of a term that's used outside of the and or
Insurance.
right, insurance. Right, it is absolutely the highest. So it's sad to see when you see things like that, when it's very clearly that they are against it. And we don't know.
Specifically.
Yeah, very targeted.
Well, you can imagine all the other circumstances, right? You've got two insureds, myself and another woman. And, what other times are you going to, how far are you going to go with that, right? If it's,
Right.
I'm an underage teenager that got pregnant, are you going to cast your opinions on that? If I was raped, are you going to say, well, actually your rapist needs to pay your medical bill,
Right.
not us as you're insured?
Right.
How far does it go? I mean, there's so many examples of why it doesn't make sense, why it's crazy.
Right.
So, okay. So we've got those two categories are big obstacles. The third one you talked about was liens. Let's go into that a little bit. I know that is probably one of the most confusing things that come in front of everybody that we deal with within this world of surrogacy and assisted reproduction.
Yeah.
So what is it?
So here we go. We're going to dive in. So
nice complicated topic.
I know. And it is definitely overall one of the most confusing things. And I think that has to do with the language in general, the term lien. I think that becomes very confusing. We hear about liens in terms of potential repossession. We hear about liens against homes again. So it's very weird to have a lien word in surrogacy. And what does that mean? And the best way that I can tell everybody is take out the word lien. I guess is the best way. And use the term right to reimbursement. And that's really what most of the insurance companies are using. The right to reimbursement, it falls underneath when you're thinking of like a car wreck, or if you're thinking about a workers' comp claim, is kind of the closest identifier that we find, that if there was an act that happened where you received money and they look at the surrogate's compensation as that money, then the insurance company can seek or has the right to get reimbursed for what was paid for by them that you were paid for from someone else. So again, thinking of it kind of broadly, I always like to use, I don't know why the car accident comes up. I think because my stepdad's an attorney that works on car accidents all the time. So it's like the closest thing that I can correlate to. But if you get into an accident and all your medical bills are paid, there's another typically insurance company or person that's responsible for those medical bills in the world of insurance and law. And so the insurance company, your insurance company, is going to cover your medical expenses, absolutely. And then they're going to look for that other party that is responsible, that caused this, and then they're going to ask for that reimbursement for themselves. Sometimes it can be a subrogation, or sometimes it's just a reimbursement against what you received as your pain and suffering from the actual accident. They're using that concept to do the right to reimbursement. What I find fascinating about that is that in those circumstances that we talked about, a workers' comp, or in the circumstance of a car accident, there is a responsible third party. I always like to use the legal term because I'm not an attorney, but sometimes it makes me feel so smart when I say it. But
You are smart, my friend.
tortious act or a tortfeasor, that then is the reason, the cause. And in a surrogacy, one of our consistent arguments with insurance companies is there's not a third party. And who are you going to deem that third party? Is it the doctor who implanted the gestational carrier? Is it the intended parent who potentially has the genetic material? Is it the donor who potentially donated? Who actually is responsible? And given that so many contracts clearly state that she's doing this on her own will, and no one's forcing this upon her, no one's causing this act, essentially, we go back to the consistent argument of where does this fall underneath the real legal argument of right to reimbursement, because it's not technically underneath something like a car accident or underneath something like a workers' comp claim. And what's interesting about it is that we've been told, and again, I'm not the attorney, so I like to argue, and then I'm like, okay, fine, well, then we'll have to do something different because you're not listening to my arguments now. But one of the things that we were told was that because there's no law against it or for it, that essentially it's a gray area that then can be exploited, and I will love to use that term, for a benefit for whom, and we don't know for whom, because the overall cost to an insurance company in the course of surrogacy is minimal over everything that they're earning. So it feels like we're going to go back to that targeted word. It feels targeted. It feels exploitative, and it's not good for intended parents. It doesn't feel good on intended parent side. It doesn't feel good on a gestational carrier. It's terrible having to have that conversation on my side to say, hey, by the way, I can get you insurance, but you're going to amounts that you're going to have to pay back. And those amounts, is it okay if I keep talking, Kim? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're perfectly fine.
It's rolling.
Yeah. Rolling.
The amounts that in terms of the payback and what they can seek for that reimbursement most of the time depends on the amount that the gestational carrier is being compensated. And those amounts can range from 50% up to 100%. And occasionally in the state of California, we can get them down to about 33.3%. In some states, there's actually no cap. It is everything and anything that was billed to the insurance company, which to me is terrifying and crazy. Then lacks insurance, essentially. There is no insurance at all.
You know what, throw in there, they're not reimbursing you your premiums or your deductibles. So they're keeping the premium, the full deductible, max out of pocket wherever you get to on your numbers, and getting reimbursed for the medical expenses they paid for. Yeah.
So they're coming off of almost with paying, literally paying nothing at that point in time. They're collecting premium for a lot of these cases. And then what we're finding is that most medical expenses are falling underneath that 55% or that 33.3%, the legal term is elusive. It becomes an illusory benefit. Essentially, it's an illusion. It doesn't exist because there is no additional benefit by paying premium because you're paying everything back in reimbursement, which sometimes that argument works if anyone ever wants to try that.
But the contract now lacked consideration, if we want to use some legal terms on it. But for the basic, general public perspective, it's they're not paying anything. They're receiving reimbursement plus your premium, and nothing went out the door for you.
Right.
And and it's the double dip. And it is, when you put it in those real basic terms, most people go, that's crazy. I've never heard of it. Just nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't exist anywhere else. It's something, you're talking about why they're doing it. they're not put in check right now. There isn't anything specific that says they can't. They found a loophole and they're going after it. And whether it's I don't know that it's a real loophole, quite honestly. I think it's abusive, and they haven't been put in their place yet with it to be checked. Now, you had mentioned California, and we know there's a lot of liens in California. Is this a California only issue?
No. So we've got California, Colorado, Oregon, Ohio, Georgia, Virginia, Maryland, Hawaii. And that's just on an individual level. That does not include the self-funded plans or employer plans that have the liens in them, which is kind of across the board and can be in any state. It just depends on the insurance carrier. The states that I mentioned are the states that it is very well known that they have liens in their policies that we are actively trying to avoid. And avoiding means finding other policies. And sometimes, it's so interesting when I used to have this thought process of, well, as long as there's an option B, right? As long as we have a B.
I used to.
Yeah. And you're like, okay,
take off
right,
and
that's okay. That's, exactly. But then you're on D and E and F, and you're seeing that options become
not
less
real.
desirable.
Yeah.
And because, and not because, it's not the best or it's not the golden of insurance, but because the networks are worse and there's not as much access to the providers that you may need to see. And because it's not a well-known insurance company and doesn't have time in the market. And so we don't know how it's going to react. I mean, two of the insurance companies that we have had to utilize given liens have left market within a year and a half, 2 years. And one of them left in the middle of the year because they went bankrupt. And they're protected by the state, and that's okay. But it's not okay that we're having to go with lesser known and lesser quality because of the lien situation. And again, how cost prohibitive it really truly can be to someone trying to build their family.
So I don't want to give the illusion that these three topics are the only issues within assisted reproduction.
No.
These are the very pointed, targeted, biggest issues we've got within surrogacy.
Yeah.
But of course, we've got greater non-coverage for fertility treatment in general, in vitro fertilization in general, which of course is a topic in the country right now.
Yes.
And very few policies covering any of that. There are some employers that can be applauded for giving some wonderful benefits out there. Nowhere near enough.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of big companies that really should be paying attention and looking at some of these creative ways to with people and family formation.
Yeah.
So for people that want to learn more about this specific issue on insurance, these problems, or they want to advocate and they want to get involved, but they educate themselves in order to do so in their own states, where can they get more information on this, Sarah?
Yeah. So wonderfully, Kim. one of the best places to get the information specifically on insurance and the coverage of insurance is going to be an organization called Insurance Access and Equity Alliance. And you, as well as me, we're members of the board and founders of the organization, and it is a wonderful place to gain knowledge for, again, what's going on within the state, what access are you going to have, best ways to navigate the differences and the nuances of insurance and some of these things that we've talked about. Also, things that really work. It's not all negative. There are some insurance companies that are truly surrogate friendly that have been historically wonderful with surrogates and have not caused problems, and understanding who those are and how to potentially access those. The other thing that will be on there too is a lot of understanding of different, what's kind of coming up in your state, not only with with the knowledge and the education surrounding that, but also, are there any bills or laws that you need to be aware of? Resolve has that as well on their list. Ours is going to be just very focused on insurance. Resolve is very broad across the whole entire infertility realm, which is wonderful. They're really looking to, again, understand the access, not just for surrogacy, but the infertility community, which again, very focused on insurance for it.
Right. So we've, recently had attorneys say, is it helpful if we go after some of these provisions, even if we're in a friendly state where we're not having problems? Absolutely. We need advocacy across the country, not just within groups that are trying to shine a light on these issues, like Resolve or IAE Alliance, but everybody. This is a responsibility of a lot of people, especially when you get down to the little basics like pregnancy.
Right.
Event.
Right. I think a good example of that, honestly, was New York. New York didn't, when they passed the Child Parent Act, none of their insurance companies had exclusions in their policy. There was no wording on reimbursement, but they wrote it in there into the contract that they don't have a right to reimburse and they don't have a right to exclude. And it's very clearly stated within the act, and even from the Department of Finance, which runs the insurance in the state of New York, they have been very clear. They've come out and have 3 different documents that are written that say they have a Q&A on their website specifically for surrogacy and infertility and what is prohibited and what's not. And it's very open. I think that was kind of an example of something where there was nothing wrong with this. I mean, they didn't allow surrogacy for the most part, but there was nothing wrong insurance-wise for surrogacy, but they made sure that it was written inside. And so there cannot be a problem now, right? Now that we've got that into law. And I would say, honestly, Nevada and the way that Nevada handled it, we had some issues with some exclusions at the time. It wasn't even the reimbursement at that point. It was just an exclusion. And Kim wrote a beautiful, beautiful law and had it submitted over and passed through and signed in. And it was back in 2019. Was it 19?
I think so.
So it sounds so crazy. It doesn't feel like that long ago. But and I think that was one situation where we were fighting an insurance company consistently and kept putting in exclusions. And when we finally threw a lot of language back at them from the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services and from the 1,300-page Affordable Care Act document to say, hey, this, we see that you're trying to do this, but you can't do this. And when it passed into law, what also was in there was that you don't have the right to seek reimbursement. And that was really important to put in there. And very thankful that Kim did such amazing work on that to get it passed through. So hats off to you, Kim.
Hats off. Before we close out the show, I do want to say that if you want to learn more about the IAE Alliance, you can go to IAEalliance.org. I gotta always remember that. It's so hard to get different endings on websites. And of course, reach out at any time. Sarah, do you want to give your website also so they know how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so we are artrisksolutions.com. And definitely reach out. We have a place that you can just connect with us there. We have intended parent webinars every 3rd Tuesday of the month too. So in case anyone has questions there, you can join our webinar. And I love talking to anyone. So feel free to call and ask questions. And if you want to get more involved in any capacity with this, let us know. Because we love people that want to, join us and help us. And if you want to learn more, we want you to know more. That's why we're here.
All right, Sarah, you are a tremendous gift to, I just got kind of teary-eyed. That was weird. You are an amazing gift to the surrogacy and assisted reproduction world, and everything that Art Risk Solutions has done for people over the years and for this industry is untouchable. And if anybody thinks they can go to an average insurance broker down the street to deal with these issues, you can't. You need to go to somebody like Art Risk Solutions, who specializes in this area of insurance, because obviously listening to this podcast, you've heard there's lots of hiccups and obstacles along the way. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Surrogacy Warrior. I hope you found our discussion enlightening and empowering. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us to decide what our next listeners are going to be and provide the best content that we can possibly provide. Stay connected with us on social media and visit our website at www.lawyersforfamilies.com for more resources and updates. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Together, we are all warriors. And until next time, stay strong and keep fighting for your dreams of parentage.
You've been tuning into the Surrogacy Warrior podcast with your host, Kimberly Surratt. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, lawyersforfamilies.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.